Welcome. Thanks so much for staying with Africa News Network First, Fast and Live. My name is Cindy Mabi. It's just gone 7:45, and this is our latest news story we're following up for you this evening. The Namaqualand coastline in the Northern Cape is in peril. An ANN7 investigation into the mining practices by two companies in the area has shown how laws are being openly flouted and how the environment and the communities are being compromised. Here's a special report.
The Namaqualand region in the Northern Cape, rugged, wild, and extreme in its beauty. The cold waters of the Atlantic hide exotic marine life and precious gems. Both form the backbone of livelihood for thousands living in this fragile economy. But the pursuit of profits and extreme mining methods used have begun to hit where it hurts the most. Two companies, West Coast Resources and Alex Corp, stand accused of forging ahead, building massive seawalls of rock, gravel and sand that will stretch hundreds of meters out to sea in the most lucrative diamond deposit areas.
Oh, they're just doing harbour renovation. They're renovating the jetty, and then on the shoreline here, we had a big problem with the very high seas, and this is a very radical, rough harbour. So it was eating into the shoreline. But then they started bringing these massive piles of rocks, so you can get a shot of that later, so people can see what we're talking about. But this is very similar to what's going on with the seawalls which are being constructed. With rocks this size, a massive bill lorries, excavators and bulldozers. Within a few days they'll build a wall out to sea. But these walls can never be rehabilitated. It's impossible.
Worse, some of these seawalls are being built by West Coast Resources even before the environmental clearance has been given by the Department of Mineral Resources, a blatant case of illegality as per activists.
They are building with sand, with gravel, with rocks, and then they are drying that area out and pumping that dirty water back into the sea, and then they actually mine that coffer dams. So that coffer dam started from last year already. Mind you, without authorization. They've already started with the dam, and I don't know what is the problem with the laws of South Africa.
When ANN7 visited the area, we found first-hand evidence of these coffer dams being built even before the environmental assessment was done. Activists in the area are angry at this monstrosity dumped on their coastline.
Yeah, check here. Here's a typical coffer dam. We can make that out. Check, it's a bay that is being cordoned off completely. Then they will suck that place dry. All the sediment will go. And no single piece of sea life will be left. Okay, so whether it ever restore itself is debatable. You know, with diamond diving, when we pumped an area out, I've gone back to those areas like 20 years later, and it has, in a certain degree, restored itself. There's some crayfish moved back in, but the fine gravel has been taken. That's where the life lies in. You check. So what will happen here? All that will look like in the end is a derelict bay that's dead. Like you'll come there, you might not even be able to swim in the sea because the water will be so contaminated too.
Bearing the brunt of these destructive mining activities are the locals, who are largely dependent on either diamond mining or fishing for their livelihoods. Queues Issues such as these, where people are seen lining up for odd jobs, are becoming more and more common.
When my contract ended, I got my last salary and no compensation after. What are we going to do? As a previous mine worker, we could be employed again, but many are stranded and hopeless. Where am I going to work? The piece jobs are only giving us 90 rand per day.
I've been a fisherman for 15 years, and this mining practice will affect us. Fish and crayfish will be scarce. Government is more focused on diamonds rather than the fishing aspect of the environment.
Locals bemoan that greedy mining companies have cornered all the concessions along the coastline, leaving individual divers and associated small-scale marine companies in the lurch.
Well, in the early days, the concessions were all held by different companies and different groups of people. And that was the right way to do it, because then it provided a lot of employment. And if you couldn't get a contract with Alex Core, then you could work on other concessions. But unfortunately, all the concessions were slowly but surely bought up. And now we have one company which sits with a monopoly of the concessions, but doesn't want to work them. But obviously what has now come to light, the reason why they don't want to work them, because they've been waiting all along to buy Namaqualand mines so they can build the seawalls and destroy the environment.
We struggle to get jobs at the sea and mining camps. Young people have no jobs. There is no form of employment at all. If Alesco or West Coast Resources continue with this mining practice, it will not help us at all. Overseas companies come here and take our diamonds and simply just leave.
Daar's geen manier vir ons om op groot companies hier te kyk om te survive.
West Coast Resources, now owned by a consortium of investors headed by one of South Africa's richest men, Christo Wiese, however, denies any wrongdoing. The only thing that they say is that a revised environmental impact assessment was filed during January 2016 with the DMR. The EIA process has complied with all the relevant regulations, including 2 rounds of public comment. But angry activists have a one-line rebuttal, that the environmental clearance process is illegal. They call it a systematic rape of the region's very fragile coastline.
When it comes to the fight between the needy and the greedy, the needy is always at the bottom of the whole chain.
Nowhere is there a bigger contrast between the needy and the greedy as visible as the one in Namaqualand. On the one hand, there are the big mining giants, West Coast Resources, but on the other hand is the growing jobless and poverty in surrounding townships, and of course the bitterly ravaged coastline.
And here's what the various stakeholders have to say about the cofferdam mining method used. Alex Corp says their cofferdams were built and approved before their erection, and the company says, and I quote, "We've heard from various sources that there's some unhappiness but have not been formally approached by any group or the fishermen themselves," end quote. According to West Coast Resources, and I quote, they say operations are fully complied with existing environmental management programs to accommodate future operations, and and a revised environment impact assessment was filed with the Department of Mineral Resources, and the environmental impact assessment process has complied with all the relevant regulations, including 2 rounds of public comments, end quotes. Now, the Department of Mineral Resources washes its hands, saying that an Environment Authority authorization was granted to West Coast Resources on the 7th of April 2017, and they were made aware of the decision on the 3rd of May this year to authorize the cofferdams below the low water mark, end quote. Now, the cofferdams are unlikely to cause irreversible adverse effects to any aspects of the coastal environment if satisfactorily mitigated, and the mitigation measures are stipulated in the environmental management process, end quote. That is a statement from the Department of Mineral Resources. And joining us in studio, we have Christopher Rutledge from Natural Resource. He's the Natural Resource Manager from Action Aid, and we have Cecilia Russell, Special Projects Editor for ANN7. And on the line, we have David Marcus, he's a community activist, and David Pels, a diamond diver in the Northern Cape in this Namaqualand region. We'll start with David, and good evening to all our guests. David, just if you were to give us a sense of your living conditions, especially since this cofferdam has been built, how has your life adversely changed?
Good day, everybody. At the moment, we are struggling. We don't get access to the sea. We don't get things that we want. At the moment, there's a huge unemployment, and we try to approach the company, but there are other like, for instance, me, who's one of the leaders with regards to these things. We had a peaceful protest, and they prefer to rather send me to High Court in order to accommodate, to intimidate us. So we are actually struggling a lot with these mines.
So what are your objections, if you can just give us a list of what your grievances are against this mining activity?
One of the things is the cofferdams that they're having here. The other thing is the cofferdams is without environmental authorization. There is no proper social labor plan that's in place. We don't know what is the structure and the composition of the BEE, how the structure looks like. Another challenge that we're having is that we don't have access to the sea, because what they are currently doing is that they are cordon off the whole area and the whole sea.
All right, David, I'm just going to ask our producers to repatch you. That line is a bit scratchy, and invite Cecilia Russell, Special Projects Editor, and Christopher Rutledge, Natural Resource Manager for Action Aid. Off air, we were talking about the cost of development and who it benefits when you come in with this imported technology and infrastructure, and at the end of the day, you leave a community and a society that is completely hemorrhaging any opportunity and have no other means of livelihood. Cecilia, how did you get to the story?
We were alerted by some activists in that area. I think we had done 1 or 2 stories around mining, and they had heard of us, and they contacted ANN7, and they came through to us. And it was a really, it's far for us to go there, but we went, we sent a reporter to go and find out what was happening on the ground. But once we were there, we discovered that the impact, there are only 2 things you can do. You can fish, or you can diamond mine. And the people that are mining the diamonds are small-scale diamond divers. And all of these people's lives are put at risk.
Yeah, I mean, we talk about artisanal miners and the general problem when the big contractors or companies come in there. They generally leave a society with very little options once all the wealth has been extracted. But the fact of the matter that the compliance in itself wasn't followed by the Department of Mineral Resources, that an environmental impact assessment was issued even way past the development was being done, and there's just impunity. I mean, yeah. How does that even happen?
So one of the problems that we have is the way that mining has occupied a very central space in our economy. So when we talk about developmental issues and we use mining, then it's really only the economic benefit that we look at. We very seldom look at the environmental benefit or the socio-economic benefit, because both of those have always lagged behind. And in this particular instance, we're seeing that an area that has been highlighted by the Blue Oceans economy, the Pakisa Blue Oceans economy, an initiative by government as part of the National Development Program, which highlights the need to develop coastal economies along using other means, aquacultures, maricultures, even energy, wind and solar can be generated from this. But with this focus on mining, those other avenues have been blocked. In fact, this environmental disaster that is unfolding before our eyes just cuts out any option to use other means of survival, including artisanal mining. So there's a huge problem with how the Department of Mineral Resources have been located as a very key player, but without the expertise to actually consider the other aspects of socioeconomic and environmental impacts.
So you're saying because now the custodian of the sector is found wanting and not having the necessary technical expertise, we find ourselves in this mess. Give us the profile of these two companies, X-Corp and West Coast Resources, why they still thrive in this devastation they're causing to the community.
Well, Alex-Corp is a SOE, it's a state-owned enterprise, and has been mining in that area for a very long time. And West Coast Resources mines for Transhex, which is the overall company. It's the mining partner, if you like. And they've also been mining for a very long time. Both these companies, if you look at their records online, they don't seem to be making a lot of money. The first people to mine a bed will get the riches, and then it becomes more and more difficult. You know, it's like in gold mining, we go deeper and deeper underground to get to. So this is becoming more difficult. So they're saying that they have to change the method. But I think that this is absolutely correct, is that the DMR is looking at it at such a narrow focus, but they also have so much control.
Yeah, but as you can see, you know, in terms of getting to the bottom of this and assisting communities, and David, Marcus, and other activists in that space, who should answer? If you just take the executive or the shareholders of these particular companies, so that we, you know, at least we can link them up with the decision makers, and hopefully something can be done.
I think obviously CEOs and owners of companies do definitely have a social a social responsibility. Whether they live up to that social responsibility when their first aim is to make a profit is another matter.
But what's the point of this exercise if you're saying the two companies are claiming bankruptcy and yet they continue with their operation? Who does it benefit then ultimately?
Look, if I can just jump in there, I think the point is that mining companies in South Africa have a very long history of claiming bankruptcy. In fact, if you speak to any mining executive, they'll tell you how difficult mining is and how they don't make money, yet all the wealth kind of sits somewhere in their bank accounts. There's always this anomaly. So I take those kind of claims with a pinch of salt, because essentially I think that one of the key colonial questions that we have, something that comes back from way back, is the fact that mining only enriches a few people, ever. And so as long as we have that situation, we're not going to find the solution to the problem. Here we have, in this instance, we have Cobus Wiese, one of the richest men in South Africa. Another example, also in diamonds, is in Kimberley. We have Marcel Golding, who's on the opposite side, come from the unions, also one of the richest men in South Africa. Both of these men are invested in diamond minings. They're making huge amounts of money, but around them, there's a socio-economic problem which is not being addressed.
Yeah, David is back with us. David Marcus is a community activist in the Namaqualand area. David, thanks again for your time. How would you, I don't even know, because, you know, we try to get extensive responses from the stakeholders. Clearly, they're washing their hands off the two companies, West Coast Resources and Alex-Corp, including the Department of Mineral Resources. So how far will you take your fight, and what are you expecting the outcome will be?
The long and the short of this whole story is, one has to be honest with ourselves, that the DMR doesn't have control whatsoever over these things. It's a question of the law is only benefiting the stinking rich, and the poor is actually at the bottom of the whole chain. The thing is, in terms of capacity, the DMR doesn't have people. They don't have control over whatsoever law they are making. So all these laws are only benefiting those who already have. So it's a great fight between the haves and the don't haves. The local community within Namaqualand Bay is also having a legitimate a land claim, and they just push it from the table because in terms of this Restitution Act, it was gazetted on 9 May 2008, but still it's the same government. They're selling the land and transfer it from the beers to the West Coast Resources. So the whole mining industry is not taking cognizance of the poorest of the poor.
Well, from the company's response, they claim bankruptcy, that this is an operation that is really more of a counterproductive, if you like, because they're not making out any money of it. And Alex Corp having to compromise based on the land claim, that essentially what they're doing is just run-of-the-mill operations. They're not benefiting. What's your reaction?
Look, we had a protest action, and they've sent me to lay charges against me to the High Court. But within their papers, they are stating that they've lost 900,000 rand just for half a day, which was from 11 o'clock the morning to 11 o'clock the night. Now, if you're putting those type of figures on paper and saying that was you lost, so that is actually two different stories. So where are we actually drawing the line? Who is fooling who in the zoo?
Yeah, I mean, the issue of illegality, that these coffer dams were even permitted to be built prior to approval on the environmental impact. Where was the community? Were you consulted? Did you know about this operation?
No, we've never been consulted, and we've never consented to it. They've only hanged some notice, and we've registered as interested and affected parties. But all these things is just paper exercise. Within their approval, they've also indicated that the coastal management wasn't even involved, and I can't see a logic reason why the Department of Environmental Affairs and the coastal management was never even consulted or involved with regards to this.
David, please stay on the line. Christopher?
No, also, I think David should mention that up to the time when the community protested at MRC, only 4 people from the local area were employed. So, you know, this threats about we're going to bankrupt and we're going to close down, really, it makes no difference to the community there. In fact, it might be a blessing in disguise if they packed up and left, because the wealth is not going to that community. It's going to Christo Visser's account, who's probably carrying it out in some suitcase, as we know has been alleged.
Obviously, there's elbow room to reform policy to ensure that, you know, if for nothing else, the community can share in the profit of these the mining activities. This is a longer process that we're talking about. In the immediate, what can be done, though, besides ventilating the story?
Well, there's public participation and public participation. And, you know, putting a notice in a library, 300 kilometers effectively, you know, that area is just vast. To say that there's going to be this, you know, this environmental impact study is not public participation. Public participation is going to the community in that area, in the Honda Clip area. It's not a very big community. It's not very onerous to do this.
If what David is saying is anything to go by, there's also a high level of criminality and deliberate action to enrich a few.
And impunity, yes.
Correct. So shouldn't licenses be revoked? I mean, if there's clear evidence of wrongdoing.
If we had the capacity, first of all, in the DMR, one of the difficulties is that the current changing of legislation has meant that the DMR has now taken on board a big chunk of work which was designated from the environmental affairs. So the department that is responsible for driving economic benefits out of mining is now also responsible for the environmental decisions that go with that. Now, that's an abomination of the first order in the first place. So the DMR has not got the capacity to manage this thing. And as David was saying, these mines then have the impunity to just do whatever they want to, whenever, and approval can come later. They'll grease the wheels if they need to.
Mining companies or business in general turns a blind eye to whatever footprint they leave, especially when it comes to the socio-economic impact. They've made the wealth pack up and leave. So, if the law permits that, though, or you can maneuver your way around it and still leave communities destitute, besides what we're doing now, the story will probably just die down.
Well, the story will die down. I mean, if you think of that area, I mean, there's just no ways that remote area with its, you go into those towns and you interview people who have never been interviewed on TV, would never believe that they would ever be interviewed on TV. This is the first time. This is real ground reporting of ordinary people's lives. Okay, so, but I mean, in order for this kind of story to be sustained would take, a real commitment from, media in general, and also, a commitment from the community, from the broader community.
Yeah, I mean, and if you're facing a Goliath or a monopoly like that, it's very difficult as a small community. And as David said, you were victimized by one of these companies yourself, David. Just tell us the story in terms of you trying to defend your livelihood and your family. What happened with these two companies?
Yes. Look, it was a peaceful protest. And the police were also on the scene, and nothing happened. No damage has been done, but they are actually laying charges against me for inciting people if we are fighting for our rights. And they are mining on, as I've previously said, on our land as well, and we're having a legitimate claim.
All right, just very briefly, Christopher, in terms of support for this community, I mean, they have the legitimate land. That in itself should give you the bargaining power.
Yes, so that claim has been lodged for some time, and somehow it's got lost in the paperwork. Very, very strange that claim hasn't been resolved after 20-odd years. So that's a problem. So certainly we work with communities across South Africa. We support the organization that David belongs to, which is MEDCON. We also work with another organization called Makua. So we can ask the public to support those organizations, to engage with us at Action Aid so that we can provide that support to these communities. And certainly we need to stop thinking about David's problem and his community's problem as only his problem. As he says, this is our problem. This is our country. What happens there affects all of us, and we need to get out of our cocoons. We shouldn't only be on the streets when we want Zuma to fall. We should also be on the streets where we want Kuba's visa to act like a proper citizen should. So we appeal to them to get involved.
Yeah, that's part of the fight, isn't it, for economic transformation, Cecilia?
Yeah, it certainly is. I mean, it's giving people access and giving them a stake in their own futures by allowing them to make real decisions around what's happening about them is very important. But I wanted to say something else, is that we have this national development plan, and one of its big things is this ocean economy. And so, I think that government itself needs to look into its own heart, so to speak, and say, in terms of this, is it really living up to the ideals that it's put there? And perhaps take a hard look at mining and take a hard look at those communities and go and say, I mean, in this last week for the Northern Cape, they lost, I think it was 14,000 jobs, but they had the highest level of unemployment in the country, that Northern Cape. Somebody has to wake up. They've got their economy is fragile, their environment is fragile. Somebody has to wake up and say, well, in terms of that, what is the best solution for those communities, and work with those communities to create wealth for them? That I see as
I mean, we will certainly stay with this story as much as possible and see what interventions come out of it.
So thank you to CNN for you guys for taking this up. There's not very many media houses that do, so we commend you. Thank you.
And we receive that in the spirit.
Yes.
Broadcasting together, we can do so much more with CNN and ANN7. Thanks so much. That's Cecilia Russell, Special Projects Editor for Africa News Network, and Christopher Rutledge, Natural Resource Manager with Action Aid, and you can get hold of them. We'll put their details on our website. And on the line, David Marcus, community activist, sharing his devastation in light of what's going on in the diamond mining there in that area.